Howie bolted down the stairs. Whoever, or whatever it was still coming after him. He could hear the thump, thump, thump of footsteps, or whatever they were, moving along the hallway over his head. Be brave, Howie told himself. Suddenly the footsteps, or whatever they were, stopped. Howie looked up. There was nothing there. And then, there it was. It stood at the top of the stairs, raised on its hind legs, larger than Howie remembered it. Much, much larger. Pudgykins! More! Pudgykins growled. More food now! As the overgrown koala started making its way awkwardly down the stairs, Howie glanced at the clock by the front door. It was too soon for any of the Monroes to come home. Benicula was asleep in the living room, and Harold and Chester were out somewhere. It was going to be up to him, Howie, the brave and courageous yet recently dumped and therefore heartbroken dachshund puppy, to save the day. How much of a threat could a stuffed animal be? Howie asked himself. Pudgikins stopped on the second step from the bottom, reached down, and picked up a sweatshirt lying there. It was Pete's and it still smelled like yesterday's soccer practice. Howie felt his knees buckle as he watched Pudgikins shred the sweatshirt with his shark-like teeth. In 10 seconds, the sweatshirt was nothing but a memory. More! Pudgikins growled at Howie. And then, before Howie's astonished eyes, Pudgikins began to swell. He grew taller and rounder and bigger. He was as big as Mr. Monroe now. How long before he was as big as a house? Howie did not wait to find out. Being the heroic type he was, he would have waited, but after Pudgikins looked at him, licked his lips, and asked, "Got milk?" Howie thought it would be a good idea to find the nearest exit. Once outside, he tried to think calmly. How to stop an overstuffed koala bear from achieving world domination? It was just the kind of question Chester would have loved. But where was Chester? Suddenly a new thought came into Howie's brain. Benicula! The poor bunny was inside the house with Pudgikins. He, Howie, the dauntless dachshund, would have to go back in and save him. He wished Delilah could be there to see him, then shook the thought out of his head. Howie dashed back through the pet door, ready to do whatever it took to rescue the innocent bunny. But Benicula was sound asleep in his cage, unharmed. Whew, thought Howie. Pudgikins hasn't found him yet. Then there was a loud crash. Oh no, thought Howie. Pudgikins has escaped. Terrified screams confirmed Howie's hunch. Passing the front closet on his way out, Howie noticed that all the Monroe's winter boots were missing. Pudgikins has been here, Howie deduced smartly. Out in the street, Howie was met with a sight too bewildering, too staggering, too weird for the human, or canine, mind to grasp. There, standing at the center of Maple and Elm, was a 20-foot-tall koala bear picking up garbage pails and downing their contents as if they were nothing more than cans of soda. Food, Pudgikins said between burps. More! With every swallow, he grew another foot. High, not at the end of his leg. Howie's sharpened. That was so stupid I had to laugh at that one. Howie's sharp and unusually large brain began to work overtime. What could he do to save the world from Pete's terrible science experiment? He was only one small dachshund in a world gone mad. One tiny voice in a sea of voices. One pebble in a field of boulders. One itsy-bitsy minnow in a school of sharks. One... Uncle Harold was just reading over my shoulder and said I'm getting a little carried away. He also wants to know why he and Pop aren't in the story. I told him I thought my readers wouldn't be too interested in such old characters. Now he's not speaking to me either. A writer's life is a lonely life. What could he do to save the world from Pete's terrible science experiment? He was only one small dachshund in a world gone mad. He might need to call in the army, the Marines, the Humane Society. But how could he? His paws were too big to push the buttons on the phone. Just then the answer came to him, rounding the corner. Pete! And who should Pete be walking with but Amber Faye Gorbish, Pete's classmate, and, more important to the story, Delilah's owner. Just the thought of Delilah made Howie's heart sink, but he refused to give in to sentiment. There was no time for romantic notions. This was a time for action. Howie went bounding up to Pete, who said, "What's up, pup?" "Ruff!" Howie replied as he turned his handsome face with his chiseled profile up toward the towering koala bear, whom he would have thought was hard to miss. "Pudgikins!" Pete cried. "How did you—" And then an evil smile spread slowly across his face like an accident working its way across a carpet. "The potion," Pete muttered. "It must have spilled onto Pudgikins. That means it works. It works! It works!" "What potion? What are you talking about?" Amber Faye asked. "Pete, don't you see that there's a giant teddy bear blocking our way? What are you going to do about it?" "No sweat," Pete said. "Pudgikins is my bear. He'll do what I tell him." "Cool," Amber Faye said, glancing at her watch. "But can he do it soon? Because if I am, 1 minute late for my piano lesson, my teacher will be, furious." Amber Faye tossed her curly blonde hair the way Delilah had once tossed her curly blonde ears. Like owner, like puppy, Howie thought. "Pudgikins!" Pete called out. The giant koala bear, who was now taller than most of the trees, dropped the garbage pail it was holding and looked down at Pete. "Food!" it said. "No, Pudgy, I'm not food. I'm your master. It's Pete, don't you remember?" "Pete," Pudgikins repeated dully. He sounded 1 kibble short of a full meal. Like owner, like teddy bear, Howie thought. By this time quite a crowd had gathered. Even the police had showed up. Some of them were talking through megaphones, saying things like, "We've got you surrounded. Don't try any sudden moves. How's the weather up there?" There were a lot of kids in the crowd, Toby Monroe among them, and pets too. Howie spotted Harold and Chester and ran over to them. "What's going on?" Harold asked the young but well-informed dachshund puppy. Howie told them. "I will save the day," was Chester's response. "Pete," Pudgikins kept saying. "Pete. Pete." Suddenly, a terrible smell overcame the crowd. "What's that?" Howie heard someone say. He turned his head. To his surprise, the terrible smell was Delilah. "Delilah," he gasped. "Where have you been?" Delilah's eyes were bleary. Her fur was matted. She had the lid of a pizza box stuck to her hind right paw. "I've been out at the town dump," she snapped at Howie. "What's it to you? I was drowning my sorrows in trash." "Sorrows?" Howie asked hopefully. Was Delilah's heart as broken as his own? But before she could answer, Delilah was whisked out of sight. Pudgikins had grabbed Delilah and was now holding her in his outstretched paw. His eyes gleamed as he looked at her and licked his chops. "Food," he growled.